The hospital room was silent. The only sounds were the faint beeping of a heart monitor and the distant hum of the hallway. Fatima lay in her bed, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She had been in this room for 3 days now. 3 days of needles, tests, and strangers in white coats telling her what her body could and could not do. But tonight she needed something no doctor could prescribe. She needed to pray. She pressed the call button beside her bed and waited. The door opened. A nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand, expression flat. Fatima looked at her gently and said, "Excuse me, could I have just 5 minutes? I need to pray." The nurse stopped. She looked at Fatima. Then she said something that made the entire room feel colder than it already was. The nurse crossed her arms slowly. "I'm sorry," she said, in a tone that carried no apology at all. "This is a medical facility. We have a schedule to maintain. Prayer is not something we accommodate during active monitoring hours." Fatima blinked. She had not expected warmth. Hospitals rarely offered that. But she had expected basic human decency. "I understand the schedule," Fatima said quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "I'm not asking for an hour. I'm asking for 5 minutes. I won't leave the bed. I just need to face the window and pray." The nurse shook her head. "I can't allow that. Your monitors need to remain undisturbed. If you move into an upright prayer position it could affect your readings." Fatima looked at the window. The first pale light of dawn was beginning to touch the glass. Far, the morning prayer, the one the Prophet, peace be upon him, said was witnessed by the angels. She had never missed it in 22 years. Not once. Fatima closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her mother, a woman who had prayed through poverty, through loss, through a war that took half her neighborhood. Her mother used to say, "Fatima, when everything is taken from you, your prayer is the one thing no human hand can remove." She opened her eyes. Outside, the sky was shifting from black to the deep purple of almost morning. She looked at the nurse again. "With all due respect," she said, her voice still calm, still gentle, but carrying something underneath it now, something unbreakable. "My faith is not a disruption to your schedule. My prayer will take 5 minutes. I will pray in this bed, I will not disconnect a single wire, and I will not raise my voice. But I will pray, with or without your permission." The nurse stiffened. She was not used to patients speaking this way, especially not patients who were supposed to be weak. "I'll have to report this to the attending physician," she said tightly. "You do that," Fatima replied softly. And she turned toward the window. She positioned herself as best she could. She could not stand. Her legs were still weak from the procedure 2 days ago. But she could sit upright. She could face the window, toward the east, toward Mecca. She raised her hands to her ears and whispered, "Allahu Akbar." And in that moment, something shifted in the room. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden light, no thunderclap. It was quieter than that, the way silence deepens when something sacred enters it. Fatima began to pray. Her lips moved with the words she had memorized as a child, words she had carried across oceans, across grief, across this hospital bed. The heart monitor beeped steadily. The 4-drip continued its slow rhythm. And Fatima prayed. The nurse stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, caught between protocol and something she could not name. Then she turned and walked quickly down the corridor to find the attending physician. Dr. Arjun Mehta was reviewing charts at the nurse's station when Nurse Linda approached him. He was 53 years old, had practiced medicine for 27 years, and prided himself on having seen everything. "Doctor, the patient in 412, she's refusing monitoring protocol. She's performing some kind of religious ritual in her bed and she won't stop." Dr. Mehta looked up slowly from his clipboard. "Is she in distress?" he asked. "No," Linda admitted. "She seems calm. But she's disrupting." "Is she disconnecting any equipment?" "No, but, is she disturbing other patients?" "Well, no, but the protocol states." Dr. Mehta set down his clipboard. He looked at Linda with the quiet patience of a man who had spent decades choosing his battles wisely. "What is she doing, specifically?" Linda hesitated. "She's praying," she said finally. A pause settled between them. Dr. Mehta picked up his stethoscope, straightened his white coat, and said simply, "I'll go see her." Dr. Mehta walked down the corridor alone. His footsteps were measured, unhurried. He had learned long ago that the way you enter a room tells a patient everything about whether you are there to help them or to manage them. He reached room 412. Through the small window in the door, he could see Fatima, still in prayer, still facing the window, her lips moving silently. The golden morning light was fully in the room now, painting everything in a color that felt out of place among the machines and the white walls. He stood at the door for a moment. He was not Muslim. He was not particularly religious. But he was a doctor, and in 27 years of medicine he had learned one thing above all else: healing was not only chemical. The will to live, the thing that pulled people back from edges no medication could reach, it lived in exactly these moments. In prayer. In faith. In the quiet between a person and whatever they believed held the universe together. He pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. Fatima was in sujud, the prostration, forehead to the bed, the position of ultimate surrender before God. Dr. Mehta entered silently and stood near the door, waiting. He did not interrupt. He did not clear his throat. He simply waited. When Fatima rose from her prostration and completed her prayer with the final taslim, turning her head right, then left, whispering, "Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah," she sat still for a moment, eyes closed, hands open in her lap. Then she opened her eyes and saw him. She expected the same cold expression. The clipboard. The lecture about protocol. Instead, Dr. Mehta smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that does not ask for anything in return. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Not "how are your vitals?" Not "how is your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10?" Simply, "How are you feeling?" Fatima stared at him for a moment. Then, to her own surprise, she began to cry. Dr. Mehta pulled the chair beside her bed and sat down. This alone was unusual, doctors rarely sat. Standing meant efficiency. Sitting meant time, and time in a hospital was always borrowed. But he sat. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "With the nurse." Fatima wiped her eyes. "I did not want to cause trouble," she said. "I know," he said. "And you didn't." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I've been a doctor for 27 years. I've watched people fight diseases with every pharmaceutical weapon we have, and still lose. And I've watched people survive things that had no medical explanation. Do you know what the difference was?" Fatima shook her head slowly. "The ones who survived," he said, "had something to hold on to. Something beyond the charts and the medication and the monitors. Some had family. Some had purpose. Some had," he paused, glancing at the window, at the morning sky now full and bright, faith. He stood up. "You will not be interrupted again," he said. "I'm going to make sure of that personally." Dr. Mehta walked out of room 412 and down the corridor. Nurse Linda was waiting near the station, arms still crossed, ready. "Doctor, I need to document this incident." The patient refused. "The patient," Dr. Mehta said, stopping in front of her, voice low but carrying the full weight of authority, performed a prayer that lasted approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. She did not disconnect her phone. She did not disturb her monitors. She did not leave her bed. She did not harm herself or anyone else. He looked at Linda directly. "What exactly are you documenting?" Linda opened her mouth. Closed it. Our protocol," he said, "exists to protect patients. Not to prevent them from practicing their faith." He let the words land. Around them, 2 other nurses had stopped what they were doing. A cleaning staff member paused in the hallway. The corridor was very quiet. "I am updating Fatima's care plan," Dr. Mehta continued, his voice returning to its calm professional register. "She is to be given uninterrupted time for prayer 5 times daily. This is now part of her medical care." The news moved through the hospital the way news always does in closed spaces, quietly, person to person, faster than anyone planned. By noon, 3 other nurses on the floor had heard what Dr. Mehta said. By the afternoon shift change, it had reached the hospital chaplain, who stopped by room 412 to introduce himself. By evening, a young Somali cleaning woman who had worked the night shift for 4 years, who had always prayed alone in the supply closet during her breaks, afraid to be seen, knocked on Fatima's door. "I heard what happened," she said softly, standing in the doorway in her blue uniform, her own hijab carefully pinned. "I heard what the doctor said." She paused. "Do you mind if I pray with you? For Maghrib?" Fatima looked at her for a long moment. Then she moved to the side of her bed, making space. "Of course," she said. "There is always room." That evening, Dr. Arjun Mehta sat in his car in the hospital parking garage for 17 minutes before driving home. He did not know why. He simply sat there, engine off, staring at the concrete wall ahead. He thought about Fatima's face when he had entered the room. The way she had looked up from her prostration, not with fear, not with defiance, but with the unshakable calm of someone who had already found the only ground that mattered. He thought about his own father, a quiet Hindu man from Chennai who had prayed every morning without fail, rising before the sun, lighting incense, murmuring Sanskrit that Arjun had never learned. Arjun had found it embarrassing as a medical student. Unscientific. But now, sitting in a parking garage at the end of a long life of science, he was no longer sure what unscientific meant. He had seen the data. Faith did not appear on any scan. It had no measurable molecular weight. And yet, in 27 years, he had watched it save lives that medicine alone could not. He started his car. Tomorrow, he had decided, he was going to propose a formal hospital policy. No patient at this hospital would ever be told they could not pray again. 3 days later, Fatima was discharged. Dr. Mehta signed her release forms personally. As she was being helped into a wheelchair by an orderly, he appeared in the doorway of room 412 one last time. "Fatima," he said. She looked up. "Take care of yourself," he said simply. She smiled, the first full, unheld smile he had seen from her. "Dr. Mehta," she said, "do you believe in God?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I believe in the look on a person's face when they speak to him." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if something had been confirmed that she had suspected all along. As the orderly wheeled her down the corridor, the same long corridor where a nurse had once crossed her arms and said no, Fatima looked straight ahead. She was not angry. She was not bitter. She was simply a woman who had asked for 5 minutes to pray, and in doing so, had quietly changed something in every person who had witnessed it. Sometimes faith does not need to be defended. It only needs to be practiced. And those who see it, truly see it, are never quite the same again.